The Honourable Lynn MacLaren.
Thank you, Mr. President. I rise today to respond to a statement by the Minister for Forestry, the Honourable Mia Davies, on the occasion of International Day of Forests. I wish to make a few corrections to the Honourable Minister's statement. The Minister referred to World Forestry Day. I and many others, including some in the public gallery today, prefer to celebrate the International Day of Forests. And foremost among those who celebrate forests are many who live and work in the forested regions of the Southwest. Just last night, for example, the Augusta Margaret River Shire Council voted 6-1 in favor of endorsing the 1,500-strong petition, which I tabled today, to cease logging in Moen Forest in 2014 and in the future. I've just learned, Mr. President, that they plan to start logging in that block on Monday. It's my hope that the inquiry is concluded before such logging would occur. In the Minister's statement earlier this year, the Minister told Parliament, for communities in the Southwest, the timber industry provides a high level of employment as well as contributing economic and social benefits. It is a vital part of these economies, and this government remains committed to the native timber industry. This is not true for the timber industry based on native forests. Besides providing very few jobs, it has costly impacts on other potentially sustainable industries like tourism and recreation, wine growing, beekeeping, and the plantation industry. And many other costs of native forest logging are not debited to the industry. The cost to the Conservation Commission of preparing management plans and auditing their implementation, the costs of trying to prevent the introduction and spread of Phytophthora dieback, and of its impacts when forest management operations introduce and spread it. Far from contributing economic benefits, the native forest logging industry is heavily subsidized by the state government. Without government support, the Forest Product Commission's losses since its formation in 2000 would be considerable. For example, in the 2011-2012 financial year, the state made an equity injection of $72 million to the FPC. This and $16 million in grants and subsidies enabled the FPC to extinguish debts of $83 million. For the 2013-2014 financial year, the FPC reported an after-tax loss for Southwest native forest logging of $10.4 million. The question that arises is, why does the Barnett government continue to support this damaging, unsustainable, and costly industry? The minister claims that the forest industry provides more than 3,000 jobs across the state. Unfortunately, if she's referring to the native forest industry, this is a gross exaggeration. The consultancy URS, in its 2012 report on the socioeconomics of the Forest Management Plan for 2014-2023, estimated that the native forest industry in WA only had 1,045 employees, slightly more than a third of the figure that Minister Davies gave us. And several sawmills have closed since 2012, reducing even further the number of jobs in the native forest industry. The minister then made the extraordinary statement that the forest industry is managed in an environmentally sustainable way. This claim flies in the face of the evidence. There are forest species such as cockatoos, woylies, and numbats on WA's endangered species list, and several have become even more endangered since 2004, when the previous forest management plan came into operation. The Minister for the Environment told us in May that sustained yield includes quantity and quality of timber. So clearly, sustained yield is not practiced in our forests. The allowable cut has always been set far above the sustainable level, and good quality saw logs are now hard to find. And under the 2004-2013 Forest Management Plan, the FPC did not once manage to sell the allowable cut of first-grade Jarrah saw logs, and between 2004 and 2014, the amount of first-grade Jarrah saw logs sold by the Commission fell by 99%. The minister's next claim was that the timber produced from the state forests is independently certified to Australian and international forestry standards, and that this provides customers with the assurance that timber products they purchase come from responsibly managed sources. This assurance, however, Mr. President, rings hollow. We know from the Auditor General's 2013 report into the supply and sale of Western Australia's native forest products that monitoring of compliance with environmental standards, contractual requirements, remedial action, and product recovery and grading requirements is inadequate, and that mandatory guidelines have not been produced on time or at all. On the 12th of November, the minister announced that the FPC had received Forest Stewardship Council certification for its Kerry forest management. Anyone aware of what is happening in the Kerry forest knows that it is a big mistake on the part of the Forest Stewardship Council, and it is being vigorously challenged. More than 1/3 of all Kerry forest in the world is now immature, even-aged regrowth, to be clear-felled again when it is 100 years old. Kerry trees don't start to develop hollows until they're at least 120 years old. So regrowth forests will never again provide homes for the numerous species of mammals and birds, such as our magnificent cockatoos, that must have hollows in standing trees to nest in and raise their young. Now, I'm finding it difficult to see anything in the minister's March statement that is backed up with facts. Most extraordinary is the minister's claim that 62% of native forests are set aside in national parks, reserves, and other areas for the community to use and enjoy. It simply doesn't add up. To get to 62%, you have to include 12 types of land that aren't or can't be logged: bullock and yate, darling scarp, peppermint and coastal heath, rocky outcrops, sand dunes, shrublands, herblands, sedgelands, and swamps. The true percentage of forests protected within statutory formal reserves is 44% of the forest vested in the Conservation Commission. Another 45% is available for logging. The balance, which is 11% of the forest vested in the Conservation Commission, is in informal reserves, some of which may be logged, and fauna habitat zones, which will be logged. Another glowing statement by the minister I've found is without basis. She said that harvested forests are regrown to ensure these environments continue to be available for future generations. It is just not true. Because of reduced rainfall and increasing numbers of pests and diseases, logged forest is regrowing more slowly than it did in the past. In 1993, forest managers planned to thin regrowth Kerry at 20 years of age. Today, they don't begin to thin it until 30 years of age, and the forest managers thought that they would get 1/4 of Kerry sawlogs from thinnings of regrowth. They're getting less than 1%. Today, there are only 334,000 hectares of forest identified as old growth, which is 15% of all the forest left in the Southwest. All the rest has been logged, much of it several times. Logging removes the big old trees, so 85% of the remaining forest has lost some or all of the big old trees, the most important for biodiversity, and ancient trees continue to be felled. The minister confidently told us that all the forest available for logging is regrowth. This is not true. Kerry forest with a single stump in a hectare is not identified as old growth, and the minister calls it regrowth. While old growth forest is protected, old growth trees are not. Under this government, 600-year-old Kerry trees are being cut down for wood chips, 400-year-old Jarrah trees for firewood. Minister Davies told us that our native forests are beautiful. This much is true, but she went on to say that they produce highly sought-after timber for quality furniture, flooring, and cabinetry. This is not the whole truth. In 2013-14, only 10% of the wood from our beautiful native forests became sawn timber for quality furniture, flooring, and cabinetry. The far greater proportion, at 90%, was sawmill residue, wood chips, or fuel wood. What is now being planned without knowledge or consent of the people who own the forests is for huge quantities of logs to be burned to produce electricity. It is time for a change of direction. Our precious Southwest forests are under threat as never before and are worth far more standing than as piles of logs. Logging of our native forests should be phased out as quickly as possible, not propped up with government subsidies.